And another thing that's really kind of interesting that I've realized recently is it seems like my best work, like the stuff that I really like, the stuff I think really looks good, that I really nailed, it's almost always like the subject that I'm trying to portray is always something that I really, really love. Like if I'm doing a portrait of somebody that I like, but like I'm not, it's not someone that I just love more than anything. Like for instance, George Carlin, I love more than almost anything in the world. Like I've been a huge George Carlin fan for, since I was a kid. So when I did his portrait, like I just feel like that really shone through in the work. So I've sort of noticed that recently too. I've been really trying to only do stuff that I really, really love because I feel like it shows through. That energy kind of carries through the artwork, and there's just like a intangible quality that exists in those pieces that doesn't exist in the other stuff. Really, I fell in love with stand-up comedy pretty early. I remember my earliest memories are watching the George Carlin routine he did on Stuff. And I think because it's a pretty tame bit, it's not really dirty. There's like one little swear word in there. But otherwise it's really benign. Like that one and the baseball and football routine. Like as a kid, hearing those and just thinking it was so funny and loving his faces that he would make and just the way he would move around the stage and he would use all sorts of different voices and and like I can still see his face doing the baseball football routine and kind of switching between the football face and the sort of happy baseball face, and the tone, and I just fell in love with it. And I think that I just love people and appreciate people that make me laugh because I really do feel like laughter is the best medicine in so many instances. It reduces stress. It increases endorphins. And it's just really fun too, just on a sort of surface level. But even like intellectually, just the idea of like how a joke is built and why it works and why it's funny and why it's not funny. So really, since I was a kid, I've been in love with comedy. George Carlin's one of those guys.
In terms of George Carlin and his comedy, I think one of the things that made him the GOAT and, basically it's because he did everything. He did all kinds of comedy. He did
Mhm.
political, he did
Yep.
silly stuff, he did stuff about language, he did filthy things. He was silly. He did it. He had a rhythm to how he did comedy. He, like you said, made use of facial expressions, and he had longevity, and he evolved, but he never lost the sense of who he was. Just like all these things stand out to me about him.
Yeah, he's so unique like that, isn't he? I think it was the special Jammin' in New York where he starts off with a whole thing, a whole rant about I think it was the Iraq War. The first Iraq War.
I was
Like
gonna say which one.
yeah, the Gulf War, like the
Right.
Desert Storm.
91.
Yeah, I think, and it was about bombing other countries and stuff, and it was funny. He made it funny, and then I think he went right into like a bit about, uh, like words that I hate, or like something, or like a bit about farting on a bus. Like he just was able to do that in a way that very, very few other comedians can or have. And he was prolific. He was, and he was putting out specials every couple of years for like 30 years. And part of that might have been because he owed a bunch of money to the IRS. That could have been part of his motivation there, that he kind of had to. But it's just, yeah, he's the GOAT for me. And I think it's kind of an easy choice in a way. It's not like a controversial choice, but yeah, he was a good writer. He was a great performance artist. The faces, the voices, the range of subjects that they did. He wrote books. Like he just did everything. He
Right.
was
His books were awesome too.
yeah, he
Mhm.
was the total package for
Right.
sure. For
Tell
sure.
me about this pizza, because I think it
Sure.
does look like him, certainly. Damn. But there's these details like in the forehead with the lines and just like The little
Yeah, so
just looking at the gray beard, it's not the white beard, it's not just totally white, you can see the details. I'm doing extra close-ups here.
yeah, zoom in on
Oh,
that. Yeah,
look at the
so
resolution is staying there. What is it? Was that sugar, powder? I don't even know. It
it's
doesn't
so
look like food like you were saying you were aspiring to do,
so
like
that was
something
one
like
of the techniques that I developed like a few years ago. I was trying to figure out how to do gray, and originally I was using mushrooms, right? Because mushrooms kind of have a grayish hue, but they're also kind of white and they're kind of black. But when you chop them up really small and put them together, it kind of gives you like a gray, a grayish color. But it's not perfectly uniform. It's kind of spotty. Um, so I just had this idea of like, what if I were to mix grated cheese, um, and oil and pepper powder. Like if I take the black pepper powder and the white cheese and I mix them together, is it kind of like mixing paints? Like, is it going to create a grayish color? And it did with the oil kind of mixed in. It created this sort of gray, cheesy mixture that's much more uniform. And I can make it lighter or darker depending on how much pepper I add. So, so I think with this one, I kind of had like a base tone. And then after I had kind of laid that down, I added a little bit more pepper and made it a little darker and, put in some of the darker spaces there. And then that kind of led to me figuring out how to use pepper powder for shading around the eyes. You can see I just used straight pepper powder on top of the chicken, which is what I used for the skin. Um, to do the shading there. And then on the cheeks, sort of right around the edge of the nose there, on the nose and where the cheek, I'll use grated cheese as like a highlight. And figuring out how to do shading like that really helped bring a three-dimensional element to the portraits that wasn't there initially.
right. There's a very dimensional. That's why it's part of why you
Yeah,
don't
and you
even
can
know
see
that
the
they're bleached,
shadow
maybe.
the shadow on the, left side of the face there. It's like a very, very thick, heavy shadow, that kinda makes the face pop out at you a little bit more.
Sure.
But actually, another interesting thing about this particular portrait, this is one of the first portraits I did where I used AI to generate, an image to work from. Up until then, I'd been using photographs, which, it's harder. It's harder to use a photograph. Whereas if I go into AI and I type in George Carlin portrait, caricature, cartoon, whatever, it might take a little while, but I can through putting in different prompts, I can get an image that just speaks to me that I feel like I want to try to recreate. Um, and it's just been a lot easier for me to do it that way. Number one, it feels better as an artist because I'm not recreating someone else's photograph, for instance, to create the artwork. It's a unique image, which is nice. It's just for copyright purposes, and also just as an artist, like it just feels better that it's something that's more unique. And also, it gives you a wider range of expressions and different things that speak to you. I kind of liked this particular expression where he's kind of looking away, and there's something about his expression that just spoke to me. I thought was interesting. So yeah, so that was kind of a big leap forward for me with this portrait, and I think I remember making it and feeling like there was something not quite right about it. Um, and I think what I figured out was that the lines under the eyes, as I was making it, they weren't low enough. There's something about the sort of bags under his eyes, showing his age a little bit and being lower. That just lowering those lines by like, I don't know, a quarter of an inch, uh, changed it from like just looking like an old guy to looking like George Carlin.